Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. Today, we are continuing on with our Let's Play tutorial of Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. Now, this is episode number 4, and in this episode, we will be visiting the wild and untamed island of Borneo and setting up that island with our troops, our task forces, our air groups. And we'll be talking about why Borneo is important, why the Japanese want it, why we want to keep them from getting it, and what we can do about that. We will also, in this episode, have our kind of first blush with submarines. In the tutorials, we talked about them briefly, but this time we will get into these subs. These are all Dutch subs right up here, and one right over here. And we will be talking about the patrol zones we will be setting up for those, why we're setting them the way we are, and kind of, a little bit how patrol zones work. We also have some American destroyers down here, and at Tarakan, we have some American destroyers there, and we'll talk about what we're doing with those and why. And we'll probably really focus on Balikpapan. Balikpapan has a huge oil center here, 300 units. It also has a refinery to take that oil and turn it into fuel of 300, and that makes Balikpapan a really strategic base, a place that the Japanese want to get to and take as soon as possible to fuel their war machine. So, Balikpapan is very important in this game. So we'll talk quite a bit about that. But before we get to that, I did want to back up for just a second. One of the great things about this game is there's a fantastic community of people that have played this game for years. They love the game. They've really thought deeply about it. And because of that, I'm getting a lot of great comments and questions about the game. And I really do appreciate that. I mean, my whole purpose here is to try to get other people into the game and for you, to understand it as well as possible. So when you play it, you're not frustrated. You don't feel like I don't understand this or what's going on. And so there are times that I simply am wrong about something, or I misstate it, or maybe I don't explain it well enough. Or actually, there's just kind of a genuine disagreement between people that have played the game for a very long time of how you do certain things. So I'm getting a lot of that, and I really do appreciate it because I think it makes this a better exercise for everyone. And if nothing else, it's teaching me some things about the game that have maybe thought about, or maybe I do on autopilot but don't think about, or I just know to do them now because I've done them so many times. Um, but I really do like that feedback. So let's go around and talk about just a few of the things that have come up here that I think are important enough to mention. And one comes from Cole himself, who put together the spreadsheet that we're following. And again, hat tip to him. That was a monumental effort to put together that spreadsheet. That's how I learned the game really, or really started learning how to think about the game. And I'm sure many of you will feel the same way when I say thank you to him. Now, he brought up the point, you'll remember when we kind of went through the basic tutorial and we set up this game, we talked about how we wanted to turn off the automatic build on the fortifications, the port, the airfield. We wanted to turn those off and go around the map and think about each one individually and turn them on if we thought it was appropriate. Well, Cole has brought up the point that maybe I should have done the same with aircraft reinforcements and upgrades. So there's, the switch that you can flip there that talks about aircraft reinforce and upgrades. And I have that on. I usually play with that on. And then when I see a place where it shouldn't be on, I turn it off. So kind of just the opposite of what I explained to you about forts, bases, um, and ports. Yeah, fort fortifications, airfields, and ports. So same kind of idea, but I have this one on. Well, he's really made me think that, nah, maybe you should generally start with that off. And a great example of that is this fighter group that is out here in Anchorage. So we went through, we set up Alaska, and this was automatically set to upgrade to P40e Warhawks. Okay, what's the problem there? Well, okay, these guys, first of all, you have 20 P36 Mohawks out there. We could potentially buy them out at some point, but that's far enough into the future that that can kind of be set aside for a second. Essentially, you have 20 P36 Mohawks out here that we're using exclusively, really, in Alaska to train pilots. They're great to have. It's great to have a big group like this that are kind of removed and away, and you can just train these guys doing nothing but escort. So that's great, right? Now, if you have this upgrade on, though, the game will start trying to cycle in these P40E Warhawks, and you may say, well, okay. What's the problem there? Great, they get a shiny new aircraft out there. Everybody at the aviator club says, "Man, those Warhawks look great." The problem is you really need these other places. Getting brand new P40Es out in Anchorage is not doing anyone any good. Um, it's not training these guys better. They can fly these P36 Mohawks till the end of time and learn how to fly fighter aircraft at this altitude. So, you know, it just doesn't make sense to have this upgrade on. Now, so we're going to turn it off and let's go up here to the information screen and kind of go a little bit deeper into it. Since we're doing the Let's Play this time, it's a little deeper than you would probably have in a tutorial, but let's go to the aircraft replacement pool. Okay, here are all the aircraft that are being produced by the Allies at this moment. Okay, you see, I mean, there's a bunch of them, right? And let's go to the P-36 Mohawk. Okay, there's the P-36. It's available, obviously December 41. That's the earliest it could be available. We just started the game. There are still two in the replacement pool. Okay, great. Now let's go a little further down here to the P40e Warhawk. Now the Warhawk is what the Mohawk would upgrade to. Okay, so all things being equal, you can just kind of assume the Warhawk is a better aircraft. We can get into the stats and the maneuverability, the speed. We could talk about all those things, but for these purposes, let's just assume if it's upgrading to something, it's better. I know the Army doesn't always work that way, and I'll have some of my friends that have been in the military before they'll say that's the most wrong thing that you've said during all of these videos. But for this game's purposes, let's just assume that's true. And so you have the P40E Warhawk that there are already some coming available here. We have none in the pool. We haven't used any, none this turn, none month to date have been used. But you see replace rate 35. You see replace rate and production rate, okay? That means that 35 of these are going to become available this month. What's the difference between replace rate and production rate? Replace rate means they're coming from off map. So essentially, you're just not seeing where those production facilities are. Let's just imagine they're in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, Cleveland's not on the map. So the great Midwestern industrial states are cranking out P-46E Warhawks. Those will be shown in replace rate. If they're made on map, like Los Angeles produces a lot of planes, for instance, and we can go look at that at some point if we want. None of these are coming from on map, but we are getting now 35, and that's per month. This is a monthly thing. We're getting 35 of these per month from off map. Okay, so these 35 come in, and what happens? Well, the game looks at what squadrons of P40Es are already out there, which ones need replacements. Well, we don't have any, none are in service at this point. Um, so it's thinking, okay, well, let's start upgrading squadrons that have P40E selected as the upgrade path, which is automatic through the AI, right? We're not picking that. Well, when it does that, I mean, next thing you know, all of a sudden, you've got, 20 new P40Es up here that you don't need up here. You would much rather when they, upgrade something out here in the map that's in a hot zone or even at Pearl Harbor or wherever on the map that's a little closer to Japan than Anchorage, Alaska, or at least more in the line of fire, you would rather those planes go to upgrading those squadrons. So that's an explanation of that. And I do thank Cole for saying that because it's a great point, and it also allowed us to get up into the aircraft replacement pool a little bit. The Bolos don't have an upgrade, so well, they do to the B-26, but we've got it off. Um, the second point is that I had a question that came in about troop levels. Oh, I'm in Russia, which is probably a whole different question that we could get into. Let's go here to Kanpur. Kanpur has these units, right? Now, I do believe we eventually ship these out. I wanted to get to this point before we get to India, though, because I know a lot of you want to get playing the game. So you're ahead of me on the spreadsheet. Maybe you've already set up the whole spreadsheet and you're like, I want to play the game, but I've got this question of why. And let's just stick with me here. Let's say in this example that we don't move any of these. I haven't looked at the spreadsheet and I don't remember in India. For whatever reason, I think maybe we move one of these, but I just don't remember. But let's say for our purposes here, they all stay here, and we don't move them. So the question is, why are we leaving these units in India up here to what exactly? I mean, nothing, nobody's coming across the Himalayas to attack Kanpur. So why would we not take every unit we possibly can, um, and ship it down this way to help us out, in Burma? Well, within that question is kind of the answer. It's so you don't do that, right? It's not historically accurate. The Indian Army, the British command, would have never left, let's say Delhi unprotected, because we have the benefit of hindsight, but there's always going to be a question of, well, heck, I don't know. Eventually, northern India, northwestern India does break away, become Pakistan. What if there's trouble here? What if, the Indians themselves rise up, which they did 4 years after the war, to declare independence, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a million different reasons why the British and the Indians themselves, the Indian government, well, let's not go down that path. Let's just say the British at this point, why they would want to keep troops in all of these areas, and it would be super gamey to send them down into Burma. Well, I think the developers for this game came up with a very elegant and perfect way to handle that. Um, and that is they give you these garrison points. I say they give them to you. It's actually, they're requiring you to keep a certain amount of garrison at this location. So at Kanpur, we see we've got 66 assault strength here. It's in green, which means it's enough. Now, where do you find this information? Right here. So port capacity, airfield capacity, fortifications, garrison. And this garrison, you have to have 40 here. If you don't have 40, you lose victory points. I don't think there's any other penalty. Gosh, I haven't thought about this in a long time, and I didn't go back. I usually would go back and look at the rule book. I just didn't do it for this time. Essentially, keep 40 here. I mean, it's that simple. I do know that you lose like a victory point if you don't have the proper assault strength garrisoned, and so um, you are going to want to keep at least 40 here. So let's see what we have. We have 15. We have, okay, so we have 39 here. That almost gets us there. And then we have 12. So I was right. 39 and 20. Now you're going to want to leave the minimum, right? There's no reason to garrison more than you have to. Now we have to do 40. So we have 39, 15, and 12. Well, if you do the math there, we're going to have to keep 39, and 12 back. What you would pretty much always keep the base force back. 39 doesn't quite get you there. You'd have to put those two together, and I'm sure that we ship this out to someplace else because you do want to keep the minimum. So that's how garrisons work, and there's a lot of them up here in India where you have to keep a certain number of troops. I think Hyderabad um, of yep, this is the one that is red at the start, and we're going to ship things there as fast as we can to get up and over. Can't remember if it's 10, so it's one short, and you like lose a victory point every time because until you get something else there. So that's garrisons. Now, the third thing, we kind of talked about this last time in relation to, remember down here, Port Hedland? And I said, oh, well, this is interesting, that we got this little resource center out here. I guess I'd never really thought about it. It's shipping resources up to Port Hedland. Um, another uh, watcher of the videos, another player of the game, said, "Oh, there are some of these out there. There are not a ton, but there are definitely some. One of them is Babo. Babo has 20 oil with no refinery and no real way to get to a refinery actually. So it's already got 100 units of oil. It's going to start building up. So as you go around the map, kind of look for these because you might want to send a ship over, a cargo ship, pick them up, and take this oil to a refinery where you have a lot of refinery capacity. So what you're going to be looking for is oil that doesn't have matching refinery, right? Um, to turn it into fuel, or resources that doesn't have matching industry to turn it into supplies. So, to the extent you have excess oil or resources, and I know in the tutorial I really talked about fuel and supply because they're the 98% of the game. You could probably play the allies without ever thinking about oil and resources really. Um, but now that we're playing it, why do that? If you can get a ship over here to Babo, pick up some resources and take it to a refinery, or what did I say? Resources, oil, and take it to a refinery, why wouldn't you? You because now we're actually playing the game. We're not just trying to learn it. So that gets us up here to beautiful Borneo, the untamed wilds. I would like to go there someday and check it out. I've looked at this island so much during this playing this game over the years that, and I think it's also featured a lot on Our Planet if you watch that. Um, I'm sure it is amazing. But for the purposes of this game, it has oil and it has refinery. We have 300 of each here at Balikpapan, and we have 90 each at Tarakan. We also have a surprising number of ships here. We have some Air Force here. So, let's jump into it and kind of look around the map. We might as well start at Balikpapan. Now, what do we have here? We have uh, four destroyers. These are all United States Navy destroyers. I have not given them really an order yet. They're going to Oh, I also had somebody send in an audio clip of how you pronounce Swerbaya. It is not Swerbaja, which sounds very American, I know. We talk about the Baja, the Mexican Baja, or the Baja California. Um, it is not Baja, it is Baya, or ba. Well, again, it's Surabaya. That's how I'm going to say it from now on. We have four American destroyers that we are going to send straight down there and then on to Darwin. Um, I like to get these straight out of theater, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now, we could use them right here. That's why I'm sending them here first, because I'm going to think about that. And you'll see why in a minute, and we'll talk about it then. Um, so at Balikpapan, we're basically just going to build up our port, or don't build the port. We're going to build up our fortifications. Okay, so this gets us to another kind of big point, especially about the Dutch East Indies here, is there's a strategy of playing this game that gets made fun of called the Sir Robin strategy. And the Sir Robin is based on a knight, that retreats all the time. Um, and the idea behind the strategy is you just try to get everything out of the Dutch East Indies that you can. You congregate it all. You could generally it's Balikpapan or gosh darn it, Palembang is generally where you do it. It's called Fortress Palembang because Palembang also has a ton of oil and refineries, and it's kind of the jewel. These are kind of the two big jewels initially for the Japanese. You've got 900 oil here, um, 20 resources, and a 1020 refinery. I mean, that's a ton. We're talking about Balikpapan acting like that's big with 300. Palembang's on a whole different scale, but we'll get to that some other time. The main point is you have this kind of dilemma at the start as the allied player. How historical do you want to treat this? Or do you just want to go into a turtle shell until you start getting all of the stuff the allied player gets? My view on this always is there is no way the Dutch are going to take their own troops and say, oh, we're just going to give up all of our territory and go to Darwin, Australia, right? So if you're playing the game that way, yes, it's a game, and I understand that, but there has to be a little reality to it, or I mean, why even play a World War II game? That's just kind of my feeling on it. You may look at it a different way, and there are going to be times during the setup where maybe I do something different than Cole or something. You'd be like, that's a little gamey. I hope not. I'm not trying to be gamey. I just think that maybe it's the smarter thing to do. You know, you have this yin and yang, right? It's a game. You if you're just going to recreate history and do exactly what the Allies did, what's the point of doing it? Unless it's just a learning exercise for you and you want to get to know the units, that's great. So there's this kind of in between, I feel like, where I try not to do anything. I keep saying gamey, but I lack a better term. I try not to do anything too gamey and try to keep it somewhat historical while not just doing exactly what the Allies did. Well, for one thing, they just made mistakes, and I know that hindsight is 2020, so easy for me to say, sitting in my office, that these guys out on the firing line made mistakes, but there were mistakes made, back in DC, back where a lot of this was being planned, and so of course, I'm going to try to correct those if I see something that I think is glaringly wrong. Now, Cole goes into this when he sets up the spreadsheet. He will not be doing Sir Robin strategies. And also, I will say this too. These are pixels on a screen, so it's a lot easier for me to say, "Hey guys, of the the Vike Nil, or or it's the 6 Nil Battalion." Infantry unit, hey, you guys sit here at Balikpop until the last man dies as the Japanese finally take it. I'm not going to get you out of here, right? We don't have the same human aspect of having the commander of these guys on the phone and saying, this oil is too important. We aren't going to allow you to leave. So we don't have those kind of moral dilemmas. So again, everything's a balance. We're generally not going to retreat these guys out of here in mass. For one, it's not very historically accurate. For two, you want to slow the Japanese up as much as possible. They're eventually going to take Tarakan. I can tell you from having played this game 100 times that Tarakan has these coastal guns that will absolutely wreck these Japanese transports coming in here. It's almost ungodly how good these guns are at Tarakan. They will destroy a lot of stuff. Um, and so we're going to also keep some ground units here because what you'll see is, the Japanese player has a lot of different places to invade. And so they might not send the strongest force, let's say, to Tarakan. Um, and I've seen allied players that retreat out way too fast and way too early, and they just let the Japanese take Tarakan with a 20 assault strength, with essentially just nothing, a battalion, you know. They're not even forcing a regiment up there. And so you've got to kind of say, hey, we've got to put up some speed bumps. Eventually, we're going to lose Tarakan. Eventually, 99% will lose Balik Poppin. But you have to make it as difficult as possible. You have to punch them in the mouth, bloody them a little bit, and not just have it be a complete walkover. Because as the allied player, I've seen that Sir Robin strategy I'm talking about completely backfire, where somebody just pulls back so fast, and the Japanese player says, "Oh, well, this is easy. I'm going to take all of this stuff here, and all of a sudden I'm going to hit northern Australia while you pull all of your forces to Palembang, and now I'm rolling down here because you haven't slowed me down at all, right?" And so they go the Nomaya route. They go over here, and all of a sudden they've got all of your shipping in trouble, and you're like, "Well, I still have Palembang." So you've got to kind of balance wanting to get these guys out and not have them, just mauled with setting up some speed bumps. And we're going to try to do that at very specific strategic locations. All of that said, we've got four I went on quite the rant there. We've got these four American destroyers. Uh, we also have or is it six? Two, three, four, five. We have six American, or no, we have five American destroyers and a light cruiser up at Tarakan. I will tell you this is one place where I deviate from the Cole spreadsheet, and I'll tell you why when we get to Tarakan. So Balikpapan, we're just building up our forts. That's it. The reason we're not going to be building any port or airfield on Borneo, you may have already guessed, is because the Japanese are going to take it eventually. Why build it up for them, right? Another thing that we may eventually do that you can do that we haven't talked about is turn off uh, repair. You can't turn off the production, but you can turn off the repair on the oil. The reason being is as the Japanese bomb these oil facilities, we will not be repairing it for them. And this is another reason you keep forces in these strategic places, even if they're going to get rolled eventually. And that is you make the Japanese bomb there extensively and maybe knock this 300. You'll see it dynamically start going down after each turn. We could maybe get this oil down here to like 120, right? If they just have to keep bombing and troops, this stuff gets damaged as they do that. So both the refinery, now the refinery you can turn the production off. The oil you cannot because it's more like a resource. But the repair and the production, as the Japanese start to come this way and there's no reason to do it now because they're not going to bomb Balikpapan on the first turn. But as we get into later December and the Japanese have pushed here into the Philippines and they are within striking distance, we'll turn that repair off and let them bomb their own facilities eventually. They will eventually be their own facilities. So I did want to point that out. These guys, they're just dug in. One other thing I will mention, the base force, we will have replacements on. That is because as things get bombed, um, we might lose an engineer or two. We would want replacements uh, to come to this unit. So we will have replacements on here. The destroyers, oh, we still have two ships in port. Cole just kind of has them sitting here. I think we'll eventually get them out. These are tenders. So this is a destroyer tender. Part of the reason the Black Hawk is still here is because you have all of these tenders in the theater. So you've got, five destroyers here, four destroyers going here. So you have this destroyer tender that is literally just made to restock destroyers. So it makes sense to have it somewhere close. We're just going to leave it here first turn, maybe the first week or something. Then you also have just an auxiliary, a miscellaneous auxiliary. Again, another tender. It has really no endurance, no capacity, no supply. I mean, this is like the least important ship I've ever seen. So there it sits. So that's Balik Poppin'. For all of the buildup I just did of how important it is, there's not a ton here. It's a lot of the oil in the refinery and these four destroyers. We do, as I said, have this sixth nil here. Nil is just the royal. It's like the Royal Netherlands East Indies Army, um, and in the Dutch language that comes down to KNIL. And so that's what it is. So if you see this, who the hell is KNIL? Those are the Royal Dutch troops. So and that differentiates. You'll see Dutch troops under two different commands, the KNIL and also the ABCD, which is the Americans, Australians, um, British, or what did I say? ABCD? No, it's ABDA. It's I should remember that like the band ABBA, right? It's with a D. It's ABDA. Um, they'll be under one of those two commands. The ABDA just does allow you to move them around. They're less restricted, I guess you would say, because they could be under different commands. But those are the two command structures we're worried about with Dutch troops. I'll come down here now to Banjarmassen. Again, we have this unit here. It's going to stay here. This actually has 60 resources. So we were just talking about these little pockets of resources where they're just kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. We may send a couple of ships over here from Surabaya and get those resources. Might as well get them out of there, not let the Japanese get those. Other than that, there's not too much here. You've got the base force and you've got the KNIL battalion. Now I'm going to look back on the spreadsheet because I just couldn't remember. There are a few places where we have transported planes about, and I did want to go into that for this episode, but this was not one of them. One thing I will mention is that we have the Marblehead up here, which is that light cruiser. The light cruiser Marblehead does have two Seagull aircraft on it. You'll see here, float planes. Um, I just wanted to point that out. We have them doing a general search. I'm not sure when we did aircraft. I'm sure I talked about it. I said I'm not sure and I'm sure all in one sentence. Um, General arcs, meaning these guys are doing search 50. So they're out doing naval search 50%. So one of the planes at any one time is doing naval search. If you don't have a specific place where you want those planes searching, so where you're setting the arcs, you just leave it at 0, 0, because it'll do a big random arc. Arcs random, you see it right there. Current arcs random. It may fly this direction, it may fly that direction. It's just commander discretion. But I just did want to point out that our light cruiser here uh, does have a couple of float planes on it. So moving on further down the spreadsheet here, we go through some places where not a whole lot's going on. Oh, pun I knew I was going to struggle with this. Pontionic. Close? Okay. If you say so. This base force, we have set its objective to Billiton. Now, why are we doing that? We're going to set up a float plane base here at Billiton. Billiton has a potential 5 airfield, which of course means it could go to an 8 if we really wanted it to. But we're really going to be bringing float planes down here. So we're going to get a tender over here that resupplies float planes, and we're going to kind of set up a ad hoc Air Force here that's going to go out and pressure the Japanese from a search anti-sub uh, perspective. So I just wanted to point that out. We're bringing that base force down here. Sengkuang, I have no idea if that's how you say it, but I liked how I said it right there. Uh, as long as we're up here, let's let's look at that. So Sengkuang, and then you also have Sambas here. Oh, and this is where this support ship, the AVP Poolster, I just said, Billiton, we're setting up seaplane. This is a tender, um, and it's going to go down here and help us stock up these seaplanes when they come in to Billiton. And so that's coming out of here. That's the one ship. So I guess we're doing Sambas first. We have two um, squadrons of float patrol up here at Sambas, and both of them were running a really big naval search out here. You see naval search. Now, this brings up another point we talked about. A lot of the stuff we set up down in Australia or in Alaska, we had at, let's say, 40%, with 20% training, and you're like, oh, that wasn't a whole lot. When you get up into the thick of the action here, we're running this search 70. So we're getting as many planes as is prudent up in the air as we can to do this naval search because this naval search really matters right away. And you can see we've got it down to 3 sectors, so it's a kind of a more narrow search than maybe we were doing before, although this looks quite big. Now you may say, why is the maximum range on 12? We could go all the way to 18 if we wanted to with the extended, so we look at our arcs here, and we've actually got this set less than the normal radius. Why is that? Well, because you're going to have Japanese aircraft that start coming down here. No reason to get these guys shot down by flying out over um, the Thai Peninsula here. So well, down into Vietnam. You'd be out over to Vietnam or Thailand. You're going to have a lot of land-based aircraft here for the Japanese very shortly. So you're not going to want to send this search out here, especially when what are they doing? Naval search. So what, why would we be looking over land for task forces? Same with these guys. They have a max of 18. It's the same plane. The Do 24K1, okay, they say so. This one is going to be running this straight up north, and you see Cole very smartly, very wisely stops our arc here just short of land because we're doing a naval search. So that's Sambas. Uh, Siang uh, Siang Kaweng up here. We've got some fighters. Now they are going to, we've only got 4, okay? We're going to escort with essentially one of them. If you look down here, what we're peeling off, we've got 2 of them, or 50%, running cap directly over this area. Um, and so they will be running that cap. We've also got 20% training because these guys are actually very poor pilots, 45%. That's a death wish sending up 45% experience. What else did we have here? We don't really have much. We just had those 5. Well, it says 5, right? We've got 1 in reserve. So when one of these gets blown out of the sky and with a 45 at will, they'll just pull right out of on that reserve that's sitting here at the airfield. So that's Sambas. Pontionic, you've got some resources here. This is another case where I don't know. If you have a spare ship, send it over here, grab the resources if you can. Although, the Japanese will be here very quickly. They come straight for Singapore in every game I've ever played because, Singapore controls the strait, it controls a big part of the sea over here, and then it starts to get you down. It's a great launching point to start just banging away at Palembang. And so, the Japanese, I think historically, the Allies held this till maybe, I think, right around December 31st or right on the very first week of January before it was overrun. There's a lot of great history. I say great, some of it's quite sad of you know, these British troops, some of the Indian troops that were here, trying to get down the Malaya Peninsula to get out of the way of what were experienced, very good Japanese troops up against, these guys were over here, they're just not as well trained. It's not their fault. They were just very green. They hadn't seen a lot of action. A lot of these Japanese forces, um, had seen a lot of action in China or elsewhere, or taking, Thailand and what was Laos and Vietnam, Indochina at that time. So, it was it was a scary time for these guys trying to get back to Singapore. Um, Now, one thing I will point out while we're up here is the Japanese have already, by December 8th, this happened on December 7th with the initial Pearl Harbor attack. They had also come across the Gulf of Siam down this way to Kota Baru and had already started attacking the Malay Peninsula. But of course, I'm down a rabbit hole because we're talking about Borneo. Not a whole lot going on here. We talked about that. We talked about that. Samarinda, I actually left these guys because I wanted to transfer them out. And I wanted to talk about something that Cole does that I may not do. Now, Cole takes this bomber force, 8 medium level bombers. He's got them running search. So I've already set them up for the search that they would be doing, 3,100, and he transfers them over here to Monado. Why does he do that? Because he then covers this whole Gulf and maybe even gets a little detection here on the Palau Islands. And you know what? I think that's a pretty good idea. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I keep him back here because the celibacy seems a lot more urgent to me as far as what's happening here at Tarkin and whatnot. But with that being said, you also have planes here. So I think I am going to follow his advice and take them over here to Monado. So how do we do that? We really haven't done it in game yet. I've been doing that off screen. A lot of times when I come to this screen, the transfer, so, I could do it from the map. So I could say select on map and just click on Monado. Or a lot of times the way I do it is I sort by support because usually the bases you're going to want to transfer to, you want them to have support. And as you see, Monado has 12 aviation support. We have nothing there. So we're going to transfer these guys over to Monado. Now you will see when we get over to Monado now they're running that search. You can see it immediately. They transfer immediately unless a plane is being maintained or is disabled, of some sort. So let's, look at this group. It had one that was still in maintenance that's still back there at at Samarinda. So we'll have to remember that when we go around the map in the future in turns. When this becomes serviceable, we'll then just transfer that over with the rest of its squad. Right now, it's its own squad, um, but you will know that because it says 29-1 VIGD/2. Now I'm just guessing that the one over here in Monado, excuse me, is just the one unit. So when that one gets repaired, it should tell us, what is it, 1 day? Nope, 2 days. Average repair time, there's only one plane, so we know it's that one. It'll be 2 days. That'll be ready. We'll transfer it over here with the rest. You kind of just don't want these orphans sitting around by themselves. I mean, could you do it that way? Sure. Now, these fighter units, B339Ds, decent fighters, not terrible. There are worse fighters in these games. Um, I think that Cole quite wise. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the spreadsheet really fast because normally I have this set up, but I wanted to save this time for our kind of talk to uh, because did I say talk to? Talk through because, we haven't done some of this stuff. And so, we kind of might as well talk about it. We're trying to learn the game, right? So these guys at Samarinda, we've got, okay. Yep. Okay. We're going to transfer one group of them to Balikpapan and one to Tarakan, which makes perfect sense. You've got four here. We're going to eventually need cap. Now, what's interesting about this, so let's transfer these guys. I already had their orders set up. I just hadn't transferred them yet. So these guys go over to Balikpapan. Okay. Now let's go down here and look at them and talk about why we're doing what we're doing. Um, you are having them train escort 100. Okay, train level 100, no range. We've got them at an altitude of 15,000 feet. Why is that? Let's look at the aircraft data. They're just as good at 15,000 feet as they are at 10, well, under 10. So they're just as good 10 to 15 as they are under 10. Fighters get an advantage when coming from above. All other things being equal, the more altitude you can give them without losing performance, you would rather do that. And so we quite rightly set them at 15,000 feet. As always with training, we have a maximum range of 0. Now, why aren't we flying these guys up? They're here in Borneo. There's probably stuff that's going to happen. Well, when stuff does start to happen, we're going to need to get them up in the air. But these guys are 45 experienced. They are going to get just rolled by experienced Japanese pilots. So let's try to train them as fast as we can. Maybe we get a week, maybe two, maybe even three, that we can try to train these guys in how to operate their aircraft. Um, and so that's what we're doing. That's also what we're doing with this other group. But we do send the other group, and I may have gotten backwards which one we send where. The 2915 and 29. Yeah, of course, this one was supposed to go to Balikpapan. I don't think it really matters. This one we will send over to Tarakan. So let's transfer to the base because we will eventually try to run some cap. Now these guys will, it's basically a suicide mission. They're probably not going to last too long when we're running cap over these important places where the Japanese will be running a lot of bombing runs. But hey, you know what luckily these guys are just pixels, so we're going to send them up to Tarakan. Okay, so I just want to do that. Now remember, here at Samarinda we have two orphan squads, or parts of squads, because that fighter group that we just transferred also just had one that was in maintenance. So we'll have to remember that. So finally for this episode, because I'm running a little longer than I wanted to, of course, uh, finally in this episode, we're going to talk about Tarakan, and then next episode, we're going to start off with these subs and with these destroyers. So forget about these guys. Well, at least forget about the capital, the U.S. ships here, the guys in green. We can talk about the other ones, which are more discuss. These guys are less discussion worthy. These guys are far more discussion worthy. Now here we have some more fighters. Oh, these are the ones we just transferred. Sorry. I wish we had some more fighters. These are the guys we just transferred. And then we also have some float patrol. They're doing naval search, of course. We're running these guys straight north up into the South China Sea. You could play around with that. I mean, you may want them to go maybe a little this way. They're a little safer out here. If you run them too close to the Philippines, they will get picked off. And that's, a good reason to maybe have them here. And you can just see the traffic going back and forth and see what the Japanese are doing in the South China Sea. We have the tanker Jolo. What does this mean? Well, we're going to load this up. I've got this as continuous supply now. Now, this starts to kind of veer into what I do a little differently than coal, but basically, we're going to have this, and I named it tanker. It's an AO. Now, you maybe remember this from the tutorials. The AOs I use early in the game like tankers. Later in the game, they are like the tenders we've been talking about, they're floating gas stations. These AOs are. Now, usually they're a lot better ships than this. I mean, usually they have a massive capacity and a really good endurance. This one, not so much. These tan, I don't know if these are, well, they're all the same make a ship, but it's not tan auxiliary AO class. Yeah, it's not much of a ship. You have several of these, and whatever. You send them on these little missions. This one is going to be continuous supply to Jalo, or it could be Hollow or Jolo. I am just not sure. Um, One thing I'll point out while we look at this tan, if this were a regular tanker, I would get it, filled up and get it out of the hot zone. Since it's kind of this crappy little AO, we can have it run this mission where it may get destroyed. Its victory value is only 4. When you're looking at your ships and what kind of you want to send where, do you want to send this thing up here when the Japanese are coming here or not? Do you want to, instead load it up and take it, let's say, to Darwin? Well, that victory value, I'm not saying it's perfect for telling you how important a ship is for your war effort, but I can tell you it's 100% accurate for how many victory points the Japanese get for sinking it. And what are we trying to do here ultimately is win the game. And to win the game is based on victory points. Losing 4 victory points is not going to kill you. Let's put it that way. You've got battleships and aircraft carriers that are out there worth 300, 400, 500 points. And so losing ships that are only worth 4 or 5, my general rule is 8 and under. I kind of look at those ships as a little expendable from the game perspective. Now, you may need them for something. The ship may only be worth 1 point, but you need it to be making a resource run or oil run or a fuel run or supply. You need it for something. Um, but you'll see the more important ships, or the ones you should be using for more important tasks, will have a higher victory value. So my kind of anything that's 8 would be kind of on the cusp. Anything that's like 6, 5, anything that's 4, I look at those as a little expendable. Sometimes you can almost look at them as, well, those guys maybe take the heat off a more important ship. So if the Japanese bomb these guys, this AO that's not worth, it's worth 4 points, you may actually welcome that even if they sink it, as opposed to a, troop transport worth 36 points that's got, a whole battalion on it getting away. Okay, so just that's kind of just something else to think about when it comes to ships. Long story short, we're sending this little AO and this little patrol craft with it, just back and forth to Jalo. Um, and I'll tell you why next episode that we're doing that. Um, this AVP is uh, that's an aircraft tender. And again, remember we talked about Billiton and how we're going to bring float planes in there and kind of have this kind of cool air area where it's just like all float planes or whatever. So we want a tender down there. We're going to do the same with Bima. Okay. So this is just adding extra supplies. You're going to be bringing supplies for these float aircraft. Um, it's just adding that. So we're loading supply. We've docked it up. We're loading supplies. We're going to go to Bima, and we've set the home port as Bima. Now, here is one place where I do something a little different than Cole. He also has this British sailor tanker go to Jalo. I do not. The reason being is this is a good ship. Its victory value is 18. That's not great for a tanker. But it's got 12,000 endurance, it's got 14 speed, and it's got a pretty good capacity, 80-75. I don't want to take any chance that this thing gets hit. Now, The other argument is it's not going to get hit just going to Jalo on the first turn of the game, and then you can get it out of here. I'm just being safe rather than sorry, making sure I don't forget the ship, that it doesn't, I don't, resolve a turn sometime and they say, oh, the British sailor was sunk at Tarakan. So what I'm doing is loading this up with as much fuel as I can, and we'll be doing this a lot out of the East Indies, loading this up with as much fuel as I can and getting it to Australia. Now I've set the home port at Darwin. Ultimately, I am going to try to have it come back up here. And I guess Cole would argue, hey, we're taking one load over to Jalo. When it comes back to Tarkin, load it up and then get it out. And I understand that. It makes sense. But when this thing gets down to Darwin, I have named it Tanker. I don't have an order for it. I actually think I'm going to change this to Balak Poppin so that I know this is kind of the area where it needs to come back to. And so when it's down there at Darwin in the home port, I'll look at this and say, oh, this was coming out of Borneo. Why don't we try to get back up there and get a little more fuel before the Japanese get there? Um, and so, Tarakan, we've kind of covered it. We're going to leave all these troops here. There's no place to put them. We've got all their objective as Tarakan. These guys are going to try to hold on, kind of go down with the Alamo a little bit. These are those great coastal defense guns that I swear just take out a ton. Look at this thing. That just looks badass a little bit. Um, Okay, and I think for this episode, I'm going to leave it there. I covered, everything on the island I wanted to cover. I did want to get to these subs out here and to these destroyers here, but we're going to do that next episode because there's quite a bit I want to talk about there as far as patrols go, why I'm doing what I'm doing with these destroyers, which does not agree with the spreadsheet. And we'll have that discussion next time. So, as always, thank you so much for joining me. I had a blast talking about all this stuff, made me think about Borneo and what the heck's going on there, the way the Dutch military was set up, and and a host of other things, float planes. But anyway, it was great fun. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, click subscribe, it always helps. And I will talk to you next time here on Strategy Gaming Dojo. Thank you so much.